Hello everybody, in this video I'm going to talk about how to end the constant and never-ending spiritual seeking that will continue until you find that one thing, truth. So if I can start with a little bit of a story. When I was 21, I had like a small shift in consciousness, and the consciousness then started to turn in on itself. I started to try and understand what I was, who I was, why I was, and it led me down a path of giving up everything I was before as a professional sportsman. Stopped doing that, and I just dedicated my life to the truth, whatever that was. At that time I had no idea, but I was just looking for it, and that aligns and corresponds with spirituality. There tend to be truth and spirituality aren't the same thing. Watch my last video for that. And the spiritual seeking I was doing was sort of plastering up a few pimples, but the plaster would eventually pull off. I had read hundreds of books, the Bible, the Quran, the Kabbalah, the Talmud. I'd read the Bhagavad Gita. I'd read all the Upanishads, all of the apparently highest spiritual teachings that humanity has, apparently. And nothing filled that gap. And now I look into the world, and what I see is millions of people, never mind religion, which is another separate argument in itself, millions of people on this spiritual path who are not getting anywhere, and in fact create their own reinforcing cycles in their mind. And this is why they can never get to that point of scratching the itch properly. One of the fundamental points that needs to be made is that enlightenment isn't a point in time. You don't get to one enlightened state all of a sudden after reading a book, for example, or after having some deep meditation event. You don't just all of a sudden click your fingers and then you're enlightened. That doesn't happen. And very often people are just waiting for a specific event. But I'm telling you now, that doesn't happen. So drop that idea to begin with. And it's also very difficult to word what this thing is, because essentially it's the truth. Now, truth can't be put into words because it's wordless. It's infinite in its own nature. So when I'm talking here, as we go through the video, please don't get lost in any seeming paradoxes. Just let them go. Ever since I turned in on myself, spent 7 or 8 years searching like most people do, I completely let that go. That seeking, completely just let it go. And what was left after letting all these things go was the truth in all its radical, fundamental emptiness and wholeness. It was just there, staring at me as if it had never left. So what is the truth? The truth is infinite in its nature, which means anything I say here to try and describe it isn't it. Any quality that you put onto it, so if you say, for example, the truth is love, for example, which is a common phrase, that can't be true. Because if it is love, it's therefore not anything else. And that's not true, because true is infinite. It can't be took away from, which means you can't take away from it. You can't add anything onto it, once again, because it's infinite. It's eternal. It's not in time. It's not in space. So by me communicating this in words, we have a beginning of a word and an end of a word, and then the word collapses. that means words aren't true. They're real, but they're not true. It's how we communicate as separate beings using separate words, separate languages, but the words aren't true themselves. And it's important here, while we're talking about this truth, that we don't get lost in beliefs and opinions. Anything that comes of the mind is a belief or an opinion. I see it all over social media, especially in the last 12 months with the conspiracy theories and everything. They say this is the truth. 99.99% of the time, it isn't the truth. It's a belief based on research. So it's important here to differentiate between all beliefs and the truth, because you don't need to defend the truth. The truth's got its own energy field. It is energy. That it is everythingness. So you don't need to defend it. There's nothing there to defend. Okay, so let's talk about what this reality actually is. What's it made up of and all that stuff. It's common knowledge that science, for example, doesn't actually know. It can't prove anything. It can't prove matter even exists. That's not to say like you just completely dismiss everything, but if we want to get to the truth, we have to eliminate all falsity. And the falsity is that material science, for example, can't answer any question. That's the reality. So what is it made up of? If we look at like the ancient Hermeticists, and we look at like the ancient mystery schools and things like that, what they say is that reality is made up of mind. Now, when they say made up of mind, the way I interpret that is that it's made up of like dream stuff. As we dream at night, that is sort of what we're living in a sort of different dynamic, a different paradigm. So if we consider everything, the universe itself, to be that dream stuff, because from that place we can now get to the truth. You listening to me is the dream within the dream. It's a never-ending cycle, a self-referring cycle within the dream. Now, this is why spiritual seeking is a difficult process and a never-ending process if you keep seeking, because you're constantly reaffirming yourself within the dream. You have to realize this thing for what it is in order to then see the truth for what the truth is. That is the end of all spiritual seeking. Doesn't mean you don't need to read books or want to read books, but it means you have the foundational truth that you're operating in the dream state, and then you can go and have real fun. You can go and actually live your life, because you know there is no I in the reality. Now, I'm not saying, once again, you don't want to individuate. I'm not saying that you shouldn't work on yourself. I'm not saying that you shouldn't interact in the world. But the truth is that there is no actual you doing anything, which might sound very paradoxical, and it is paradoxical. The I that you consider yourself to be in the dream state, which is I, Alex Hickman, sitting here, in this dream, I want to know things. The construct of Alex Hickman, the ego structure and all its relating functions of Alex Hickman, wants to become enlightened. The irony is you cannot become enlightened until you realise there is no Alex Hickman there. In the same way that there is not you there. It's a construct to enable us to function in the world. And evolution has created that. Evolution and creation, same thing. It's all the dream. It's created that need for an ego in order to interact with each other, to become societal beings. But the whole purpose of spiritual seeking in reality, in truth, is to become more lucid in the dream. So if you're working with a coach or a therapist or something like that for trauma and things, or if you want to just live a better life, the number one focus, whether they do that through more subtle means or whether they just come out with it like a hot knife through butter, is to become more lucid, more awake in the dream that we're in, because then you know and understand self with a capital S. If you don't have that foundation, you're just operating in a dream asleep. So now let's talk a little bit about reality and unreality. What's real and what's not real. Subjective reality isn't the truth. So you listening to me talking through the screen is subjectively real to you, or the idea of you, but it's not the truth. What's unreal is also not the truth, of course. However, what's true is real. So what's real isn't true, but what's true is real. Notice how the word real has an unreal. Notice how the word truth doesn't have an untruth, because there is no opposite. But there is an opposite to real. Now that suggests that it's not true, because truth doesn't have an opposite, but reality does have an opposite, because real has an unreal. And spiritual seeking, the need for more information, the need to know things, the need to ascend, all this type of stuff that you hear in the spiritual communities, that's operating in subjective reality, not in truth. Truth doesn't need any of that. Although, as I mentioned before, they do align, spiritual seeking does align with truth, but you have to drop it all in order to realize it. What you'll notice is that this seeking, this constant seeking, is actually a suffering within itself, and you're causing that suffering to yourself. You actually want it, to be fair, otherwise that is why you're doing it. You are constantly needing to know something, knowing that by knowing, you're going to inflict more not knowing. As the saying goes, the more you know, the realise you don't know. A lot of people know that, but they still continue to know, or seek to know. Why? You want the truth, you don't need to know, you need to unpick everything. So, how does suffering come from seeking? It comes from the illusory duality within the dream. So, believing that there is a you and a me, or a cause and an effect to everything, that causes all suffering. The illusion that there is somebody doing something creates the guilt and the hate and the shame, the fear. When there is no I, when there is no Alex here to do these things, there is no suffering. There is no more seeking left. Now, as I've said, this does not mean you can't go and operate in the world. Life is your best teacher. I sit here today talking about these things because I've spent the last 8 years interacting with the world trying to figure this stuff out. Consciousness turning in on itself and trying to understand itself doesn't mean you don't go out into the world like a lot of Gnostic teachings teach you that the world's evil. That's not true. That's another belief. The truth is the world, as much as the truth is this. The truth is everything. The truth is what it is. So, trying to keep adding stuff into your perception because you consider yourself a separate being to the person over there is the cause of all suffering in the world. You can drop that right now with this instant, with truth. Living in that state you can then go out into the world operating with joy and peace. Peace is the main one, and bliss. But you don't like live in that blissful state all the time. You just have it at the forefront of your knowing that non-duality or oneness, or some of the new buzzwords, that is the foundation principle of existence. So when you get angry, when you get sad and all these other things, you still have that sort of unconscious peace. You're always at that level of, there's a blissful awareness that no matter what happens in life, everything is happening by virtue of its own essence. There is no like doer doing anything. It's just everything / nothing happening, or apparently happening, based on our perception of the awareness. So I often have coaching clients who I sort of express some of these truths to them, and that they struggle to like comprehend how I can be in business at the same time, and how I can like run an investment company. And I go, well, why wouldn't I? It's the perfect time. It's better to do it after you realise this information than you do before. Because they can't grasp that operating in the world is doable after recognising this. But if you want to go to the deepest foundations, there is no me doing anything. The doingness is happening by virtue of consciousness itself. Everything is consciousness. So there is no me doing anything. There is no you watching this. It's just consciousness watching consciousness going inwards on itself to figure itself out. If you like, I think I heard Alan Watts say this, it's God playing hide and seek with himself. And once you have that foundational principle of existence, what fear is left? I buy and sell real estate. If I didn't have the foundations here of what this is, I don't think I'd make the decisions I do. So being an entrepreneur and being an investor, it puts me at an advantage with a lot of other people when I have this knowledge. It's not really knowledge, because knowledge means you're putting stuff in with this truth. You see, words are very, language trips you up, because once again, you're trying to lineate something that's completely non-linear. Consciousness is happening as consciousness itself, which manifests into this, and people perceive it in whichever way they perceive it. The perception is consciousness anyway. So when people are getting so panicked about the world and everything, the truth is that consciousness is doing it on its own accord. You might talk about secret societies and all this. I've been down that path. I've read countless books on it. I've studied it on YouTube and whatever else. The fundamental principle is that consciousness is doing that itself, and the perception of it is consciousness is perceiving itself. We're trying to go back in. That's what all of this is. Once again, I think this was Alan Watts. He said, God got bored and then created humans and the universe. But humans, let's say, as the pinnacle of creation, at least on this planet, if you believe in other planets and whatever. And then, as part of the dream, forgot who he was. And that was the whole point of being here, is to wake up in this dream. Now, I think there's more truth in that myth. Because myths aren't true, they're beliefs, but I think there is truths within that myth more than most people would like to comprehend. Both because it's a very, very lonely existence when there's only one, which is why a lot of people keep spiritual seeking, because they don't want that existential loneliness. If they keep seeking, they're never alone, because there's always something else to know. So essentially, God got bored, started to dream, put human beings at the pinnacle, at least in this realm, and then wired it into the coding that we forgot that we were him. Now go and operate in the world with that base knowledge, or I've said knowledge again, with that base truth. Becoming lucid in the dream is the answer here. It's the answer to all suffering. So in closing, I'd like to say that this information isn't to be accepted. Don't just take it and run with it. Figure it out. Figure it out for yourself. I spent 8 years spiritual seeking, constant. Mystery schools, books, meditating until my backside was red raw. Buddhist temples, I still go there. Buddhist temples, constant. But only when the truth revealed itself to itself did I stop. But please don't take this information as the truth. You have to figure it out for yourself. It's also completely useless. Like, this information doesn't serve people really. It's like maybe a bit nihilistic to say like the fundamental truth is that you don't exist. Is that nihilistic? Possibly. But once you have that reality, you can then operate in the dream state as a true individual. You can make a real difference knowing that. Entrepreneurship and investing and living the good life, a virtuous life, becomes natural. You don't have to think about it. It just happens by virtue of your consciousness, the consciousness, not yours, the consciousness. So there's no value to the individual here in the common sense of the word whatsoever. If you're looking for some golden nugget, this isn't it. There's no enlightenment going on here. There's no set point in time that's going to go, oh, I'm now enlightened and live in a state of bliss. I still get angry. I still get all the evolutionary traits we all get. That's just common. That's just always going to happen. Anyone who says they don't are lying to you and trying to just probably get money out of you. So a lot of my work is trying to integrate this truth with people who are operating in the business world, the entrepreneurial world. Can you see how if people get this, they can operate so much with a clear mind and an organic way of living, a more holistic way of living. Everything's interconnected. Everything's so simple. You don't need to complicate everything, which is what most people do all of the time in the dream world. It needs to be complicated in order to sustain itself. The truth is radically simple. Okay, so I'm Alex Hickman. Check out my website, alexhickman.co.uk. For more information similar to this, I do write some articles and all that. Also, check out my Patreon. I am about to set up a Discord group to talk about the truth and also entrepreneurship, investing, cryptocurrency, all that other good stuff, man, because they're all interlinked. Once you know how put all this stuff together, living the good life and having the very foundation of truth, they're interlinked. Of course they are, because the truth is infinite. Right, so I'll see you on the next video.